Libya, stunning what is happening there. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, frankly, going after his own people. What do you make of what's taking place in Libya, and what's really the next step for this country as we watch this whole thing unfold?
Well, you have to watch not only Libya, but all the others that have gone through this transition in the last couple of months, Egypt, Tunisia, and there are movements afoot in Bahrain and Yemen and other places. What you're seeing across the North African region and down through the other Arab lands is a yearning for representative government. People are saying, why are we being led by these unelected monarchs, or why are we being led by people who may have been elected at one time, but they've been there for 30 years? And so social sites and the people in these regions looking to what happened in the old Soviet Union and how democracy has spread, they want their chance. And now they're pushing back, and they're pushing back with protests and demonstrations, and unfortunately with quite a level of violence. And that's what's happened in Libya. In Libya, you have Muammar Gaddafi, who's been there forever, and I'm not sure how stable he is. And he has decided that he will fight his own people. He would kill his own people, rather than try to reform or get out of the way and let other forces take over. It's too early to tell where this is going to end up. But however it resolves itself in the days and weeks ahead, Gaddafi's over. He's out. He's got to leave. His time has passed, and he ought to understand that. His son, the younger Saif, he ought to understand that. You can't stay in power by killing your people and trying to make the whole country a jail. That won't work.
When you were Secretary of State, you made it perfectly clear as it relates to how the United States should be looking at the rest of the world. You have U.S. senators saying, hey, let's establish a no-fly zone over that particular country. Yet others say, wait a minute, the last thing we want is for America to step into a situation where Gaddafi could say, see, they're the ones behind all of these protests. How do you respond to those people who say, let's intervene militarily to assist those fighting for freedom in Libya?
There is a danger in intervening, but there's also a danger in doing nothing. But I think before you intervene, you better have a clear understanding on whose side you're intervening, for what purpose. What is our national interest in it, other than the moral outrage of seeing people being killed? Because moral outrage takes place in many places throughout the world where we don't intervene. And don't let the vividness of the images drive you to a position that isn't sensible. And you have to ask yourself this question. If we're going to intervene militarily and start bombing and shooting people in order to keep the planes from attacking people, what do we do about the AK-47s? That are attacking people? What do we do about all the weapons that are being fired back and forth? Can we just pick out a no-fly zone and say this is terrific, or are we getting ourselves involved? And so this is a difficult decision for not only the United States, but for the international community to make. I think it would be much preferable if it was a completely indigenous resolution to this crisis, that the people who are protesting and demonstrating and fighting for their rights win. But we have to be careful, we have to watch it, but don't just jump in because the heat of the moment suggests you should jump in. If you're going to not let their planes fly, what are you going to do about the forces, the ground forces, that are really doing the killing? The planes don't seem to be doing that much damage compared to what's going on the ground. So what's the difference? And if you're going to go in the ground, then you got a whole new ball game, and you better think it through carefully as to where we want to go in, how would we go in, and where we come out. Right now, I think just putting pressure on Gaddafi and the regime is the way to go while you take no options off the table, to include military options, but be cautious as you decide which military options might be appropriate to bring to a higher level of consideration.
On another story, a couple weeks ago when I saw the story about Curveball basically recanting the claims about WMDs in Iraq, you were very upset. With that reaction. We've seen former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld come out with his comments. What do you make of the comments that he has made as it relates to what you knew, what you didn't know, as it relates to WMDs?
Well, I think Don and I I have other disagreements about the book, but on this one we're both in the same ballpark. I didn't know that there was a person named Curveball. I didn't know that all the...
So no one shared that information with you?
We didn't know about a Curveball. I don't know where the name came from. But I had 4 days to review the intelligence information and get this presentation ready for the United Nations. And I tossed aside anything that was not presented to me by the intelligence community as multi-sourced. And on this specific item, the biological vans, which is what Curveball was the source for, I was assured repeatedly for a period of 4 days by the defense, by all of the intelligence agencies, defense and CIA, that we had 4 independent sources that could verify this, and they were even able to create pictures of what this van would look like. And so I went forward with the understanding that this was multi-sourced. It was only months later, many months later, that it started to unravel. And I heard, well, it wasn't 4 sources. It really turns out to be 1 source. And oh, by the way, we never interviewed him. Well, I could tell you I was not a happy camper when all this information came out, because I did the big presentation. But we have to keep in mind that that same misinformation was in the National Intelligence Estimate months before I spoke, and it was given to Congress, and then Congress voted a resolution on the basis of that. That same information was in the President's State of the Union address 2 weeks before I spoke to the UN. So we got bad information. The real question is, why wasn't it known to the intelligence community? And some people says it was known. It just never surfaced to the higher levels. Why didn't we do a better job of finding out what we really knew from this particular source, since we were relying so heavily on him? 2 months, 3 months after the war started, and we had this van in our hands. It didn't look like any biological van to me, but the CIA was continuing to insist that's what it was, but it wasn't. And it all rested on this one fellow who we now know as Curveball. And so people are asking me, well, did you know about it at the time? Of course I didn't know about it at the time. If I'd ever known that this was a single source in a German detention facility that we had never interviewed, and that there were people within the intelligence community of the United States that felt it was a bad source, I never would have used it.
And is it the key, a single source? Just like in journalism, you always want to get more than one person to corroborate.
Absolutely.